to The Double Up. I'm Shannon Hughes.
And I'm Rachael Tilley, and we're here to serve as the voice of women's surfing.
Good morning, sunshine. How are you?
Good morning. Early morning here in Australia. Feeling good, feeling excited to dive into today's conversation. But how has your day been, seeing as you've already lived half a day over in America?
Well, I'm still super jet lagged, but I'm back in California now after being in Tokyo.
Oh, true.
And Aaron woke me up with just enough time to run down to the beach for a quick surf before jumping on a call with you.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. He packed all the surfboards, the wetsuits, the sunscreen, and tasked me with bringing the towels. And we got to the beach and I didn't bring any towels with us. So that was one way to start the day. But
I've done that. I've had my board bag, like a soft cover board bag, where I've gotten to the beach and going, oh no, I don't have a towel. And I've just like used that as like to change into my wetsuit, to change out of my wetsuit, dry myself off. It was the most awkward thing to use. But if you forget towels, there is that option. It has successfully been done by myself.
There's always a way
before.
around it. So that's been my day so far, Rach. What's happening with the lockdown situation for you in Australia?
Well, fortunately, here in Southeast Queensland, we got out of lockdown after 8 days of being locked down. It actually wasn't too bad. I spent my time while I was meant to move house all week, so that did keep me busy packing and everything. I am here sitting recording from my new place that I live, which is really great.
That's fun.
And yeah, but really fortunate to be out of lockdown after 8 days. New South Wales, Sydney area is still in lockdown, and it's been like, I want to say 2 months now.
Wow.
And Victoria just went into another lockdown. So yeah, we're definitely, I feel like every country doesn't know what's happening in other countries of like you only know what's happening for yourself. And I talked to so many people back home in America or other places, and they're like, what do you mean? Like you guys are in lockdowns again. So definitely a very current present thing happening for everyone here in Australia. But yeah, we were really fortunate to get out after 8 days. So thankful for that, and back to work, and back to being able to go out and enjoy. If I wanted to go out for dinner, I can now.
That's great. I'm glad that you guys have a little bit of freedom again. So nice.
Yeah. So, we have so many exciting things to talk about today, Shannon. But before we jump into all of that, I wanted to give a quick note that to just tell everyone who does listen to us, first of all, thank you. Second of all, sign up to our newsletter on our website, give us feedback, send any questions, topics you'd like to hear, etc. This is definitely something we'd like to share with our audience, and a collaborative conversation we'd like to have. Our website is www.womensurf.net. Our email is info@womensurf.net, and our Instagram is @womensurf_. Join us in the conversation. Prompt us for things that you would like to hear. And hopefully we can continue. Well, hopefully we have been bringing things you like to hear, but hopefully we can just continue to dive into conversations that are relevant and things you like to hear.
Yeah, there's just so much that's been going on in the surf world. So if you have any ideas of things that you'd like to hear about, please let us know. All right, Rach, well, let's get straight into the hot topics. This week, we only have 3 hot topics. There has been so much going on in the surf world that I feel like we could probably have 10 or 12, but we felt like the 3 that we chose just have so much content to them that we wanted to really give ample time to discuss each of them.
Let's get into it.
All right, so for our first hot topic, we've got the finalized results for the North American qualifying series this year, and we've got the final 8 women that have made it into the Challenger series. So the last event that finished up was this weekend here in Huntington Beach, which is where I'm currently at. It was the Jack Surfboards Pro, and we saw Caity Simmers take out a big win. We'll get into more of that later, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got the final 8 women that are going to be entering into the Challenger series with a potential to qualify for the CT by the end of this year, which is really exciting to kind of have that wrapped up here.
Yeah, that's really cool. It was interesting to see how the names might have changed from this last event. That's something that we talked about last week. But yeah, Shannon, do you want to talk about who did end up qualifying from the North American region?
So we've got Brisa Hennessy took out the lead for the North American QS, but she's already qualified for the Challenger Series via the Championship Tour. So we're kind of scratching her name off the top of that list, and that bumps into the 9th place surfer on that rankings list that's going to get in as well. So coming up in that second place position was Kirra Pinkerton, followed by Mia Collins, Alyssa Spencer, Samantha Sibley, Tia Blanco, Sawyer Lindblad, Leilani McGonigal, and Ella McCaffrey. So there's a few names in there that we're really familiar with and that we have seen, kind of surfing at that top level for a long time. And then there's a couple of fresh ones as well, which is just really exciting to see a bit of a changeover that's starting to happen within women's professional surfing.
Yeah, really exciting. I think it'll be really good now that the Challenger Series is going to be like its own tour, and kind of separate itself from that QS. It'll be interesting to see these girls now take on that tour and how that may lead some of these surfers onto the championship tour, whether it will be, they might find it easier now to qualify or harder. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, taking a look at some of the surfers on that list, some of the standouts, we're seeing Sawyer Lindblad. So she's a young competitor coming out of California. She is the only surfer in the North American field to qualify for the Challenger Series without surfing any overseas qualifying series events in 2020. So she is 3 for 3 when it comes to the QS. She's only surfed in 3 events and she finaled in all 3 of them, which is incredible. She's only 15 years old.
Yeah, that's a great record.
So good. So she came out with a win in her very first event that she had ever entered on the QS. And then she followed it up with 2 second place finishes. Just this weekend here in Huntington, she came second place at the Jack Surfboards Pro, which was a result that she needed to get herself into the Challenger Series. And she did it with a second place finish. So that's super cool.
Yeah, I always love seeing that when surfers, they need a result. They need to finish in a certain place, whether that be above quarters, above semis, but then even more stressful, like when you need a final finish or something like that, because obviously it just gets harder and harder to reach that point of the event. And that's the exact excitement that I was kind of leaning on last week of saying it'll be interesting to see how the rankings change and the surfers who do rise to that occasion when it's called for, and who secured their names into those spots. So that's really great to see of Sawyer.
Yeah, just an incredible performance from her over the weekend. And then another surfer of note within that list is Ella McCaffrey. So she came through in that 9th place qualification, which she then gained the Challenger Series spot because Brisa Hennessy at the top of the list obviously has that through the championship tour. So Ella McCaffrey only surfed one overseas event in 2020, which was the Maui and Sons Pichilemu Pro down in Chile, which was actually held in December of 2019, but it counted for the 2020 qualifying series. And she made it into the semifinals there. And then she coupled that up with 2 more semifinals at the start of 2020 here in the US. And that was enough to qualify her for the Challenger Series just behind Sawyer at the finish of those rankings. And so again, 2 kind of younger surfers that are just starting to make a name for themselves. And I think we're going to see a lot of big stuff from them coming up in the next couple months on the CS.
Yeah, it's interesting too to see that there's a December 2019 results still carrying over, obviously, because of how the whole tour went, disappeared during 2020, as we know.
It just finished.
But yeah, we also see the fact that that result was, like you just said, in Chile. We won't be seeing that moving forward as she is a North American surfer, but because it's through that transfer period of the world qualifying series to the regional now, there is obviously that teething period of where you do have to honor some of those results. So that's where that comes from.
Absolutely. And, as I mentioned, kind of those overseas events, as opposed to just the events running here in North America or like in the US specifically that Sawyer Lindblad surfed in. So there was at the end of 2019, there was the Chile event at Pichilemu, which counted for the 2020 tour. And then the qualifying series had a big kickoff between China and then Australia for the start of 2020. So that's where we saw a lot of the surfers at the top of those rankings who had kind of gotten to that stage in their careers. Either they've been competing on the qualifying series for years, or there's some of those newer names to it. So, in 2020, it was those big QS 5000s and 10,000s that the Challenger Series was kind of just being introduced, that we saw surfers like Kirra Pinkerton get the chance to now start competing in internationally. And that's where a lot of those big results actually from China and from Australia counted into the overall points that are going to carry those surfers like a Kirra Pinkerton into the Challenger Series this year.
So let's talk about Kirra Pinkerton, as she was the 2018 Junior World Champion. So she's been on our radar for quite a few years now. And like you said, started having those really strong results and leading herself into a really strong position to qualify soon. How do we think that, you know, with the tour changes, 2020 events dropping off, how do you think this what are the ramifications, I guess, what do you think to her career?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Kirra goes this year, because she was kind of that new generation coming into the 2020 qualifying series where she could have had a pretty good run to making it onto the championship tour. I think her surfing is at that championship tour level now, like absolutely. But now that, you know, the tour kind of went on hold last year and it's restarting, there's a few new surfers or younger surfers that are just younger than what Kirra is, who are like that next generation that are even coming up behind her. And so now that shift in conversation is almost going to like the ones that are just maybe a year or two below where Kira's at. So I think she not only has now the battle against the women that have been on tour for years, or the women that are kind of in their 20s or their mid 20s at this stage, she's also now battling against, you know, the younger teenagers, like a Samantha Sibley or an Alyssa Spencer, who are really at the top of their games at the moment. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. Like there is a lot of extremely talented women that are going for very few spots. And now the younger generation is like nipping at their heels as well. Even thinking of Caity Simmers, who's only 15 years old, that just won this qualifying series event in Huntington. It'll be interesting to see kind of where Kirra ends up fitting in with that. I feel like her surfing, specifically Kirra's surfing, is more suited to the CT than a lot of the current women on the qualifying series. And a lot of that I'm, you know, referencing due to like the footage that we saw drop from her scoring some of the heaviest barrels that we saw in Indo over 2020. She was really,
that was great to see.
Yeah. Like she was able to just get on a plane and, you know, had the right kind of setup to be able to just really work on her free surfing, which was incredible. And I think it kind of showed actually where her power surfing was at, where her ocean knowledge was, like her barrel reading and everything is at that championship tour level, which is going to be a step ahead of a lot of those younger women. But when it comes to battling out on the QS and into the Challenger Series, you know, it comes down to contest surfing, which is always difficult. What waves you're going to get on the day, you know, it's going to be a little bit different than what she's been surfing in Indo for the last, 6 months.
That's a really good point, because timing sometimes is everything on getting onto that tour. Like you just said, now she has kind of that 1 or 2 years younger below her, now ready to also qualify as well, or really start competing in that same division. So that's really interesting to see how that might affect her. But I do think, like you just said, the fact that her surfing may be more suited to the CT. And I think that really has something to say about the fact that she's had a bit more time to mature her surfing, mature her competition surfing. So I think we'll be seeing her on the championship tour in the next year or two.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting. She's just such a good surfer.
So moving on to the Mexico Championship Tour event coming up at Barra de la Cruz, we are seeing the first Mexican woman to surf in a CT with Shelby Detmers winning the trials. So that is really exciting.
Yeah, that is so exciting to see that we're going to see Mexican women surfing on the championship tour finally. So Regina Pioli she came runner-up at the trials. She's now been given a spot in as well as the injury replacement for Lakey Peterson, who unfortunately had to pull out of the event. So we're actually going to see 2 Mexican women competing at that event coming up this week, which is really cool. Shelby Detmers, originally born in Newport Beach. She is a name that we're really familiar with because she's been competing on the qualifying series for years. She also took home a copper medal at the 2019 Pan American Games, and she's the 2018 and 2019 Mexico national champion. And of course, she just represented Mexico at the 2021 ISA World Surfing Games. So that's really exciting. I think she's going to be kind of the top of those 2 women. Obviously, she won the trials, but she just, kind of a little bit of her age and her experience in heat surfing, I think will take her a long way in Mexico.
Yeah, well, we will be seeing Shelby compete against Joanne Defay and Malia Manuel in Heat 2. And then we'll be seeing Regina compete against Carissa Moore and Bronte McCauley in Heat 3. So both really tough heats. Obviously, as the wild cards and the injury replacements, you go in as bottom seed. So of course, then they're going right up against the top with Carissa and Joanne. Yeah, that's always the toughest as the bottom seed to push through, you know?
Totally. Like thinking about that for Regina. So she has only competed in one QS before, the Los Cabos Open of Surf back in 2017. She did represent Mexico at the 2019 ISA World Surfing Games in Japan, but she just has less competitive history. And so for her to have like done well in the trials and now to know that like one of very few heavily competitive heats that she's paddled out into in her life is against the 4-time world champion and the Olympic gold medalist, Carissa Moore. That's like, that'll be something she'll remember forever.
Definitely. They're both right into the thick of it. So in other news on top of that, we will also be seeing Silvana Lima competing in the Mexico event as the injury replacement for Nikki. So not seeing Nikki again now after not seeing her at the Surf Ranch as well. But it'll be great to see Silvana again. The last CT that we saw her surf in was the Lululemon Maui Pro in 2019. But more recently, we just saw her compete in the Olympics, representing Brazil, of course. So that was good to see her back on the world stage. And it'll be interesting to see how she then dives back into a CT event here.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see Silvana in with that injury replacement for Nikki. So Silvana first made her debut on the championship tour back in 2006, which is 15 years ago.
Wow.
So she's kind of one of the legends on that side of the women's draw. But she is super hungry as a competitor still. Like she is not ready for retirement, which I love. So in this June, she took out the win at a QS 1000 in Ecuador, the 2021 Corona Montañita Open, which just shows like how hungry she really still is. Yeah. She's also qualified for the Challenger Series. And so she'll be ready to go in Huntington this September, just in a few weeks' time. And yeah, I think that's like such a cool nod to who Silvana is as a surfer. The progression that she's brought to the game and her power surfing is going to be really fun to watch on the right in Mexico.
Well, and these opportunities for her to compete on the world stage with the Olympics, the World Surfing Games, and now this injury replacement opportunity are definitely gearing her up really well for that Challenger Series. So yeah, it'll be good to see her back in that.
Well, let's get into our last hot topic, hot topic number 3, which is Stab High. How exciting has it been to see the first 3 episodes drop through, Rach?
It's been good. It's I want to say like a mini series. It's going to be about 6 episodes in total. We've seen 3 drop so far. In all honesty, it's not what I would normally watch. It is both guys, guys of all ages. I want to say, Shannon, do you remember how many guys there are?
I don't have any idea because I haven't watched the men's clips. I have not watched 1 or 2. Okay. I have only watched 3, which focuses on the Ladybirds division.
Yeah, so I did watch all 3. Not the series I would normally watch. I find guys just doing a bunch of airs a little bit boring, to be honest. Sorry if that's a bit harsh, but it's true. And we did see little clips of the women in there. They're called the Ladybirds, which is really cute. But yeah, like you just said, episode 3 really focuses on to the Ladybirds. And yeah, it is all women. It used to be when this first was introduced a couple years back, it used to just be women under 15 years old division. So I think that's really interesting because it really talks to, I feel like I should preface this in saying the Stab High, it's a competition run by Stab Magazine where they go off and film and push each other to do the best airs. And there's a panel of judges and it's all just the whole point of the entire thing is to do aerials. Obviously, that's something that is still emerging on the women's side of surfing. But yeah, my point I was trying to get to is that the women that they're bringing in were all under 15 years old. So that's where the push, and that's the generation that is pushing the progression in that of aerials and bringing that into their repertoire. So I just find that really interesting and kind of speaks for itself. Now they have pushed that up to an under 17 division as the Ladybirds. So again, that generation is maybe just getting a little bit older, but still speaks that it is the young generation pushing that progression.
So yeah, it's really exciting, Rach. I love that they've kind of, increased the age by a couple of years just to keep girls like a Caity Simmers in that conversation. She's 15 years old now. It gives her a couple more years of being able to travel and to be on the road in these kind of pressure cooker situations where she's able to get in the water with some of the best men in the draw as far as, men's air games go, and to be able to kind of continue to push where women's surfing is going without just tapping out because she's too old now.
Yeah, too old being 15.
Too old being 15, exactly. So episode 3, the only one that I watched, mostly also, I don't enjoy watching guys do airs that much. Like, I think it's really incredible, but I think I suffer from something called aerial blindness. And honestly, I swear I can really understand and really absorb everything I'm watching, when they're on the face of the wave. The moment that they go above the lip and they're just in the air doing spinnies and rotations, it's taken me a long time to be able to track with that. And so it actually is something I had to focus really hard on learning before heading to the Olympics, just so that I could really try and recognize what each air was that was happening. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, just to be able to see them drop through. Their 3rd episode is out now, and it really hones in on the 6 women that were there. So those 6 women, there are 3 repeats. And they've already been part of the Ladybirds and Stab High over the last couple of years in Erin Brooks, Caity Simmers, and Bella Kenworthy. And then there were 3 newbies in the mix, which was really cool to see. Bella Nula, Sophia Medina, and Zoe Kaina. They're just all pushing progression so intensely while being really sweet and really encouraging to each other. And I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of it overall. At the moment, Caity Simmers is currently 2nd to Erin Brooks in the rankings and the way they kind of do their scoring system. She's the only girl who's currently not comboed by Erin. And so that means that for the rest of the 4 surfers, for Bella, both of the Bellas, Sophia and Zoe, they all need two new waves in order to catch up to Erin, where Katie's already got 1 really good wave and just she could do it, I think, on a single left. If she does a really big air on a left, she could get the score to take out Erin Brooks. But yeah, I just thought it was really cool to see and to hear all of the girls, as well as some of the conversation from the judges, really break down and dissect why Erin Brooks' huge reverse was so important in women's surfing. Why Katie's big straight air was maybe better than Erin Brooks' big rotation. I thought it was just really cool to kind of be able to get into their minds, and they did such a good job of breaking down each of those maneuvers.
Yeah, I think, if you follow our Instagram or see any women or any surfing media, you probably would have seen Erin Brooks's air reverse. It's being potentially dubbed as the best air reverse done by a female, and being compared to the likes of Carissa's air reverse that she did back in Newcastle earlier this year. So yeah, that's really awesome to see coming out of that, seeing that she's only 13 years old. And just like you said, Shannon, the commentary coming around it, what these girls are able to learn from being on that stage of kind of not only just trying to do airs, but kind of being in, like you said, that pressure cooker situation where they are getting judged. They're trying to just consistently improve themselves. They're on this trip purely just to do airs and purely to just keep improving. So it'll be good to see the next couple episodes drop. The 4th episode will drop on Tuesday, August 10th, and then the final episode Thursday, August 12th. So later this week coming up. So that'll be good to watch, and it'll be good to see how the women wrap up.
And so good to hear 14 and 15-year-olds talking about being pushed by the next generation. So Zoe Kaina is 10. She weighs 55 pounds and she can already do, she can get into the air, which is incredible. And the other girls talk about her as we're doing pretty good, but the next generation is really already pushing us.
I know, I love that.
It's so good. It just makes me so proud of girls that rip.
I know. I think it was Erin who did say that, is that she's getting pushed by the next generation. And, with Bella being 10 and Erin is 13. And I just think, but that's awesome because having her already in that mentality is, like she's saying, it's already pushing her to continue to improve. And that's what's just going to bring the women's tour in the, upcoming 5 years just to that next level. It'll be really good to see.
So exciting. Introducing our newest segment, the Post Heat. We'll be catching up with the recent happenings within competitive surfing.
Yeah, Shannon, you were able to catch up with Caity Simmers this weekend down at the Jack Surfboards Pro 1000. why don't we head straight into it and head down to the beach with you and Caity?
Well, I'm down on the beach with Caity Simmers. She's just taken out a huge win at the Jax Surfboards Pro. Caity, it's your very first QS win and only the third you've competed in, if I'm correct. How does it feel to take a win?
Yeah, I didn't really do the best in my first two, and I'm really happy to win, yeah.
Talk to us about that final against your good friend Sawyer Lindblad.
Oh yeah, me and Sawyer have been like competing against each other for probably, I don't know, a lot of years, and she's so good, and she's my biggest competitor, and she's also a good friend, and she's the best, and she's also really gnarly in the water, so.
Well, you were able to get those two high sevens. How did you find that in a lineup that was kind of slow today?
Yeah, I don't know. You kind of just have to maybe just go on a closeout and send it, because it's hard to get a wave with a combo. So I'm happy I found at least a couple with some sections.
Well, you're definitely sending it out there. And talk to us about some of your goals. If I'm correct, you're not into the Challenger Series coming up, but you've got a good run now to set yourself up next time around?
Yeah, I don't think I can make the Challenger Series, but maybe, I don't know, if I get into the U.S. Open, that would be cool, and I don't know.
Well, congratulations. It's so cool to see you with a win. And talk to us about Stab High Costa Rica. I can't leave the conversation without asking you about, getting to just do airs for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's always the trip I look forward to the most, because it's just you're just like free surfing with some friends and trying some airs, so that was a really fun trip.
Well, congratulations. Thanks so much for the chat, and we'll look forward to seeing you take out a big win at the next one.
Thank you.
Oh, that was so cute and great to hear Caity just talking about her win. I love that. Especially when you're younger and you're starting to do post-heat interviews like that and stuff, it's kind of almost you have to learn how to just process all of your thoughts of what just happened in that heat into like a quick post-heat interview, And I loved just actually how raw her take was on, just going, well, actually, I did just have to go on closeouts. And that was just good to hear her initial reaction from that.
Yeah, it was kind of challenging surf, like being down there to watch the finals. And it really was mostly closeouts. There was like a couple of 2-turn combos, or they could connect all the way to the inside shore break. But that was like going through that real dead section, kind of at, Huntington South Side, as it always is. So yeah, it was really cool to catch up with her. And I love that she like kind of had that nod to Sawyer as well as being like her fiercest competitor at the moment. And those two are like pushing each other to be at the very top, and they're only 15 years old. They're both 15. And then after we kind of finished that interview, Caity was sharing with me that she actually thinks she might have a chance of getting some proper wildcards into the Challenger Series.
That's awesome.
Because she won, so cool. So she won the Pro Junior at the U.S. Open, the Vans U.S. Open in Huntington, the last time it ran, which was in 2019. And kind of standard to that is that whoever wins the Pro Junior one year, they get the wild card into that event, the main event, the following year.
Oh, well, that would be great to see.
Yeah, she might actually get the call up for the U.S. Open, which would be really cool. And then because she just had a win now at this, QS 1000, that might set herself up to kind of, if she could get through a couple of heats at the US Open, it might put her on a little bit of a space to get some wild cards into the other ones. So that's all pure speculation. But to know a surfer like Caity, I feel like she's pretty calculated, and that's why she's winning in competition. And so she's kind of, I was expecting her actually in that goals conversation to go more with, well, my focus is for next year. This was a good year to kind of, learn a little bit. But she was just straight in on what else can she do in this current season, which is really cool.
Yeah, well, it's really great to hear from her. And thanks, Shannon, for going down to the beach and talking with her.
So fun. We have one more post-heat to share, which is a voice note from the wonderful Bianca Buitendag after her silver medal finish at the Olympics. So have a listen.
So I start off, it's been a long road, as you would know very well. I was planning on retiring 2018, and then they announced that the Olympics would be part of, that surfing would be part of the Olympics. And coming into 2020, I'm like, okay, I'll wait 2 years, and then the postponement, so really testing my patience. But I just knew it was an opportunity that I couldn't let go by. So And the 12 months during COVID without events or anything really gave me time to prepare well, which is something I don't feel like I feel like I might have missed in years previous. So it really gave me time to go to the gym frequently, to go to different coaches across South Africa, to make sure that I really am going into it with the best chance that I have. So I got to spend time at home, which was amazing. Got to live with a routine, which was amazing. Things that people take for granted that have normal lives, I definitely did enjoy. So that was good. I got to spend an extensive amount of time with family, especially with the lockdown and everything. So I felt like that was necessary after being on the road for 10 years and having missed out on a lot of important moments. Then I went through to Japan on arrival. So the fires in Durban and the protests were happening, so our kit never came before we left. So I was just trying to find something that was green to put on the plane. So we went off to a rough start, but I mean that did fuel the fire to really bring some good news home and to do it for South Africa or as a collective and not necessarily for myself. So I just remember having a bit of this urgency in getting on the plane, like, okay, Bianca, you have to really make this happen, because I feel like the country needed some good news because the headlines were just tragic day in, day out. So I got there. It was obviously extensive COVID protocols, which was all good. I could understand the situation. We got to the village and then my mind just was blown. I don't know, it was crazy. So we got to the village, there's 20,000 of the best athletes in the entire world, all within 300 meters radius. So that was insane. If I just experienced the first week even before the event had started and gone home, I would have been happy. So that was insane. I obviously got to share it with Greg Emsley, our coach. And we were just blown away by the actual scale of the event and the occasion. Obviously, nothing compared to what we've experienced before, and it was just such a privilege. I don't know, there were 200 South African athletes all living in a building. I was rooming with a canoeist, 2 triathletes, a javelin thrower, and hurdles runners. And I really became good friends with them. So that camaraderie and team spirit and just the crazy atmosphere during the whole Olympics was an experience in itself, never mind the actual surf contest. So then one thing led to the next. By divine intervention, amongst other things, I made it to the final and walked home with the silver, which obviously carries weight. I mean, now I feel like I've got more attention to kind of say what I want to say. And God just told me, this is temporary, you need to talk about things that have everlasting effect. So I just made sure, the NGO that I'm involved in, get some traction, and I just really wanted to because I know how fast it comes, and that's exactly how fast it goes, all the attention and messages and everything. So I just wanted to use that peak to make sure that once I do retire, that 10 years of my surfing life wasn't given up for nothing, that it has some type of effect carrying forward. I am really trying to push the school we're going to build for life community services in George. We're actually sitting today starting a page to make sure everyone has all the info they need. And I felt like God literally made me surf for 10 years, go through the excruciating exhaustion of the actual typhoon, the finals day, just to show the world how much he loves those kids. And I'm getting used for that purpose. There was just too many things that aligned, and it just felt too effortless to not be from God. So taking my responsibility in that, and I'm not taking credit where credit is not due. So the silver medal means less to me than the fact that God is using me for something bigger. But I mean, people are talking to me now. I've got the center stage to say what I want to say, and I think people are a bit more interested, which is great. I'll use that. But otherwise, a week I'll never forget, mainly because I saw God's hand in it. And then yeah, it was amazing. I just can't put it into words. Not necessarily the achievement. Obviously, I burst into tears on the podium, etc., etc. But I think that was just from exhaustion and just an overwhelming sense of purpose at that point specifically. So I would say, in general, the whole experience was just amazing. Once in a lifetime.
Well, that was really good to just hear Bianca's voice. And, you know, it's really amazing to hear after the Olympics happens and when athletes start kind of dissecting what it really means to them. And I think it really comes out to different countrymen in different ways. And you can really tell from Bianca just like how much of the weight of her country that she brought to the Olympics with her and how much that meant to her that she wanted to do it not just for herself, but to bring back good news to South Africa. And yeah, that was just really amazing to hear where her heart was at with that. But honestly, how much pressure she was putting on herself too, that's really great that she was able to push through that. And yeah, like I said, not just for herself, but for that bigger picture. And now that she can come back to her country and bring back that good news and, you know, use her voice for those positive things now in the country.
Yeah, I just have so much admiration for Bianca. She's really a hero across, I think, so many aspects of what a hero is made of. You know, to know that she was carrying the weight of her country, and South Africa, for those that aren't aware, went through some really kind of times of turmoil over the last 4 weeks, a couple of weeks leading up into the Olympics. And so just to know even like Bianca's journey in getting to the plane to get to Tokyo.
Yeah.
And like the heartache involved in that and just the logistics of like the fact that, you know, her uniform didn't arrive from Durban because of the protests and things that were going on there. And that's like even those little things that would
crazy.
kind of just throw in like almost seeds of doubt or seeds of like, she said that angst that she had in just getting onto the airplane and the weight that she was feeling to bring back that, like you said, that good news or that like sense of hope to a country that really just needed hope for a moment. Mm-hmm. I spent 7 years, you know this, Rachel, but living in Jeffreys Bay, and Bianca and I became good friends through our little surf community there. We didn't live in the same town ever at the same time, but you know, it's a very kind of small knit surf and faith community there. And it's just been a real honor to be able to watch Bianca's journey, especially as she's headed into this, you know, conversation around retirement. And I mean, what an incredible way for B to retire, like on a silver medal at the Olympics, the best way. And there was quite a few athletes who had actually considered retirement before the Olympics and then decided not to because they wanted to give it one last shot to get in.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, yeah, I just thought it was like so incredible to see all of her hard work pay off. And once again, just even to, you know, kind of hear her reflections on how much weight and how much she kind of understands almost the fleeting moment of being at the forefront of conversation right now. She has this platform. She'll have this platform for a long time, but it goes past so quickly.
Yeah.
I think she's just she's in an incredible space to be able to share her heart, her faith, to be able to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. And yeah, it's just really sweet to see her kind of tie all that together. There's a great New York Times article that came out. The New York Times caught up with Bianca within like 24 hours of her getting the silver medal. So we'll tie in that article into the show notes for anybody who wants a little bit more into what her more competitive journey was like on that side of things. And then as well as the nonprofit that she mentions, that she really feels she has this opportunity now to get the voice out for those kids within South Africa. That nonprofit is called Life Community Services. They are a Christian NGO that's working to confront the dilemmas and crises facing impoverished children in South Africa. They're primarily based in George, which is in the Garden Route in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. And it's really an area that's deeply affected, as is so much of South Africa, just by poverty and so many things that kids are growing up having to face that they just shouldn't have to face. And so if you have, you know, for those that are listening in, if you have anything kind of pulling on those heartstrings, we'll attach their website in there and you can learn more about that organization that Bianca is speaking up for. It's lifecommunity.co.za. I just think, I don't know, I feel like it's such an incredible way for Bianca to finish off her career, an Olympic silver medalist, and really just taking the opportunities that she can to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves.
Yeah, it was really great to hear from her. And thank you so much, Bianca, for sending that in to us.
Today's main discussion, we dive into the new WSL schedule for 2022. We'll talk through the mid-season cut and the WSL finals.
I'm really excited to actually talk about this. And I want to frame it up first saying that it's actually for the first time that both the Championship Tour and Challenger Series will have a fully combined men's and women's schedule, as well as an equal number of events. So it's kind of funny that I actually didn't realize at this point that we weren't at that stage. And I'm really excited to see that now.
Yeah, it's such a good change overall to that WSL schedule. So some of those initial face value changes that we'll see to the stops on tour, well, possibly the most exciting is that we're going to see the first ever official women's CT at Pipeline, which is just going to be the greatest. Sunset is also back on the schedule for the very first time since 2010. So over a decade since we've seen the women competing out at Sunset. Surf Ranch is out, which is a big one, and it's been kind of an event of controversy over the years. Yeah. And so they've just decided to chuck it out of the calendar entirely. Trestles is back as a championship tour event, which is, obviously one of the most rippable waves in the world. So that's always exciting to see. Chopu is in for the second time in the modern era on the women's side of the draw. So I think we're going to see the level of just barrel riding progression really pushed with that one. And then the Gold Coast is out for the championship tour, but it's now in for the Challenger Series. So I think that's great. It's giving the Challenger Series one of the best waves and actually really good waves for that series of events.
Yeah, those are some really exciting changes. Some new spots or just returning to spots that will be really good to see. Personally, being from San Clemente, I'm really excited about the Trestles bit. Was definitely a bit devastated when that initially got kicked off the tour. But yeah, it'll be really good to see them this year at the WSL finals and the next year just as a regular stop. So looking at these changes that are going to happen next year, and most notably that change of the reintroduction of the mid-season cut, something that the WSL, or formerly known as ASP, back in 2011 have already played around with before. So back in the 2010-2011 era, there were actually two separate changes that happened to the tour that kind of left an overall bad taste in the mouth of most pro surfers and surf fans, which is why I think we're seeing today a lot of
kind of like a lot of people, having those negative feelings about this new announcement.
Yeah, exactly. So the two changes that happened were that the men's field was cut from 45 to 32 in 2010 to streamline the elite a little bit more, just less surfers overall competing on the tour. And it's a change that we have seen remain in place today, that there are only 32 men competing on the championship tour. But the other change that happened was that there was a mid-season cut introduced as well in 2011. So looking back, a lot of people actually kind of combine those two things to overall happen at once, which maybe then is why, people also have such a bad feeling and bad memory about it. But also coming from San Clemente myself, we saw Tanner Gudauskas lose his spot on the championship tour because of that mid-season cut. And I know coming from San Clemente as a kid, that just left a bad taste in all of our mouths, as he was, him and his other Gudauskas brothers were just hometown heroes, and we really wanted to see them progress. And we had finally just seen them make the tour, and to see him fall off was definitely disappointing. So that, I think, put a lot of initial hate into that new format. It also complicated things with the fact that they also had this one tour ranking system, which doesn't stand anymore. But at the time, it meant that some surfers who were doing okay on the CT fell off tour because of how they were doing on the QS. So instead of these two separate ranking systems, like you have the championship tour surfers and then you have a separate qualifying series, it was just all one.
That is so strange to think about now.
Yeah, it was definitely a really confusing system. And one of the things that it led to Bobby Martinez most famously calling it the wannabe effing tennis tour in a post-heat interview at the 2011 CT in New York. And that was a very famous interview. I remember when that came out. And he was fined heavily for cussing on live air. But it also led to more than one retirement, including Bobby's. So that's something that we're starting to already see happen on the men's side with Julian Wilson, Jeremy Flores recently announcing their retirements. It also begs the question, will we see this happen now on the women's side? We haven't really heard any negative feedback from the women's side in any regards in that way, but now looking into 2022, we will see the men's draw shrink from 36 to 24, and that being 22 on the rankings with 2 wildcards at each event. And then the women's tour will shrink from 18 to 12 with 10 from the rankings and 2 wildcards. So definitely big cuts there, and that'll be really interesting.
Yeah, that's such interesting kind of insights to things. I've got a couple things, to kind of respond to within that. So having that retirement conversation, knowing that a couple of the guys are already saying that they're going to wrap up their competitive careers, focus on other things within surfing, which is really cool for them. It's going to be interesting to see what someone like Nikki Van Dijk does, I think, coming into the next season, because she's been notably absent this year. It's seemingly that she could maybe still be competing. She's still surfing at home, possibly. So kind of interesting to know that she's just opting to not compete in these events.
Well, yeah, not seeing her compete since Rottnest Island, right? Because she pulled out of the ISA World Surfing Games in El Salvador. Then she pulled out of the surf ranch, and now she's not going to be in Mexico. So definitely really interesting to see if that's like an actual play by her, or if things are just going on in this year that she's needs to, hit the reset button and start over next year.
Exactly. And then the other thought to, you kind of were able to share that history of those changes in 2010 and 2011 to the men's tour. We didn't actually see any shifts in the women's tour at that stage, which is why there isn't really any history to talk about. I was able to catch up with both Beck Woods and Kim Woolridge, who are both former competitive surfers on that side of the things. Beck was specifically competing in those years when those big changes were happening. And the reason we didn't see any of those big, things affect those changes or cutoffs affect the women's field is because they only had 16 on tour. So thankfully, the women's field was not chopped in half or chopped down to 10 or even 8 surfers. So it's interesting to kind of see that this is, one of those first times that it's really going to have a heavy impact on the women's side of the draw, as opposed to just impacting the men's side of the draw.
Yeah, definitely. I think another reason too of going back to that time of 2010, 2011, to a note that I said earlier in this segment, is that the women didn't have as many events at that time either. So I think that would have been really tough with there only being about 6 events on tour. That means just after 3, you would have had women falling off the tour. So really exciting to see now, at least, that the women will be following the same exact tour schedule as the men. And there is that equality in event numbers now too.
That's just really exciting to know. I don't know. Thinking about that, the women getting to surf at all the same spots as the men and having equal prize money and just being able to get time in at the world's best waves is a really great thing for women surfing.
So just to tee that up of what this is going to mean on actual competition days and what we're going to be seeing, I did some calculations based on if they're running 30-minute heats. Could be different, but on the day. But if they're running 30-minute heats, the women's draw will actually pretty much half the time that it takes to run. So at the moment, it is 23 heats to run a full complete event with 18 women being on the tour. So what we're about to see in Mexico, if they're running 30-minute heats, it's going to take about 11 and a half hours of competition time. Now, I did some math and some heat drawing when we changed that down to the 10 surfer or the 12 surfers on tour, sorry. And this probably won't be exactly the way that it's going to line up because I am not an expert heat drawer.
I love that you've worked this out anyways, though.
I tried. So I had to work it out as actually 12 people in a draw was kind of hard to work out because, if we have the round 1 like we do now and then go into an elimination round, after that, it worked out to only be 10 people, which is, again, a really kind of tough amount of people to make an even draw with. So bear with me. The format that I kind of ran to make these calculations is that we're going to have a round 1 of 3-person heats like we do now. No elimination round. We're going to then go straight into a quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. Now, if we're kind of using that as a guide, that's only 11 heats and 5.5 hours surfing if, again, we are running at that 30-minute heat. So it pretty much takes it from needing a day and a half to complete to only needing half a day to complete an entire event. So I think one of the most exciting, and obvious things that we'll be seeing from this cut in half is that we're going to be seeing those top level matchups happen sooner in the event. So, the matchups that we normally see in the pointy end of the event at the moment will be those heats pretty much right off the bat. So that's one thing that is a positive to take away from this. As we'll dive into the positives and negatives moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, I love that everyone's, getting those opportunities in the first few events, but then to be able to see those really top level matchups early on is going to just make the sport more exciting to watch anyways in, the starting kind of rounds. Also, Rach, imagine if they run overlapping heats with that small of a field, like a potential 5.5 hour day could be brought down to just a few hours, which is it's a pretty
crazy.
Strange thing to kind of think about.
Yeah.
How quickly surfing could run. It could almost start running the way a football game runs on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. That sort of conversation that's more scheduled, that's easier for viewers to see, and also gets the surfers surfing at the peak of swell when the right swell arrives.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point as well, because right now surfing struggles to get on any kind of free to air live TV just because it's so hard to schedule. So if you're looking at a Channel 7 or something that has to be, scheduled ahead of time, it's really hard for surfing to get on those channels because we don't know when we're going to run. So if we know that there's a good swell coming and we definitely know we're going to start on this day and it's only going to take a certain amount of time, we might be able to, start seeing surfing expand into those other channels, which could also, just be better for audience viewership and reach and all of those things. So I want to dive into some, positives and negatives around this. Shannon, we might have a few differing opinions on this. I'll just tee up from the beginning that I'm actually for this format. And contrary to what you might see all in the comments of WSL posts at the moment, I was scrolling through the other day and just going, wow, people are not that excited for both the WSL finals to return, which is funny because we haven't even seen it happen yet. So we don't know if it's going to be good or bad, which I guess is true. Which I guess is the, argument of some people going, well, wait until it just happens. But the amount of people that are just writing it off already, I think is really interesting. But yeah, I think that honestly, the tour's stale at the moment. It's been like this for so long. The events are so long at the moment. And I think they can get quite boring. This might be harsh to say, but you have some exciting heats and then you have sometimes the heats that you're not as excited about the matchup and you will just kind of go and get lunch during that time and then watch a heat after that, if that makes sense. So that might be a bit harsh, but I feel like it's kind of reality. And those heats are just all taking up time and make these events just so long. So this will definitely, the mid-season cut will definitely shorten those events, take away that. But I also like the race that it's going to now create through the entire tour. So right now we've been following this narrative around the WSL finals top 5. And I've been quite enjoying that narrative because, by this time of the tour, we have Mexico that has started now, actually, and then Chopu. And then, normally in past years, we'd be then going into pipe. But so we have about 2 events left, right? And at this point in the season, normally you really only care about 1, 2, or 3 surfers because it's, who's in world title contention. Where right now we actually care about 5 to 7 surfers because it's all about who's going to make that WSL finals. The cutoff, everyone's really close in that 4, 5, 6, 7 range who will fall off. And so
yeah, it is really close.
Yeah. So I've actually been enjoying following that narrative and it's been keeping me engaged of how that leaderboard is changing. So we're just going to see that narrative increase to multiple types of narrative throughout the year. And with that mid-season cutoff happening right after Margaret River, we're going to have for the first 4 events, I think, the narrative of, well, who's going to make it into that top half? And I think there will be a lot of eyes watching Margaret River because of that. And definitely myself, that's just a narrative that I would really engage into.
Yeah, I think just to add in a couple thoughts there around that mid-season cutoff, my one negative takeaway from it is that the surfers in that bottom, well, like every surfer that's not just kind of a guaranteed requalify through the CT in that top conversation every year, anyone that's battled through the QS, they've put in such hard work for like the year leading up to that, or, you know, years leading up to like getting their QS points and rankings high enough to the Challenger Series to then actually get onto the CT.
Yeah.
And they're only given a few events to then be, well, 5 events to then be cut out of the picture. Like, to me, that feels really brutal to those surfers who may have just spent like an entire year working so hard, so deserved to finally get to that championship tour conversation. And then it's such heavy pressure in those first 5 events to have to perform to keep themselves there. So that's probably like the one negative to me, is just that little bit of a feeling of like, oh, I just want to see everyone have the opportunity to surf at the best waves because they finally made it to that point.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's kind of like what I was saying with Tanner Gudauskas before, right? Like everyone in San Clemente was just like, this sucks because we've just seen Tanner work so hard to make it on and he only got a few shots and now he's off again. Like, that's such a valid point.
It's like seeing their life dedication. They finally get there. And then suddenly it's just like, oh, well, like you did good to get here, but you're not good enough. So see ya. And then they have to restart that up again.
The positive thing that I do now see with this new format, though, is as opposed to what we saw happen in 2011, the surfers that do fall off after Margaret River then have an entire tour with the Challenger Series, which is now this new introduced tour, to go straight onto. And they could actually continue to surf on a global tour, being the Challenger Series, surf it till the end of the year, and do well enough to just requalify for the next year. So it's not like then they're back onto the, you know, what everyone in the surfing world calls the QE grind, to just flying around to 1000s, not much prize money and all of that. Like, at least they're still going to now this newly created tour to kind of eliminate that narrative that I think we've just talked about, of being like, wow, they've just made the championship tour. Now what? Like, in a blink of eye, they're already off. And what does that mean now? So I feel like at least there's now that pathway for them to get back on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that is good. And I like even just having a look at the dates that all runs when Margaret River finishes at the start of May. Like, the start of the Challenger Series is then 3 days later on the Gold Coast of Oz. And so the WSL in that stage, like, they've done a very good job to recognize, okay, we're going to have these surfers already in one place. Let's keep the momentum rolling for them. Literally, like, keep their funding in a safe place where they can, like, not have to jump onto another flight to another place straight away. Like, make the most of being in one place.
Yeah, exactly.
And allow some of those surfers that are going to be kind of in that negative mindset, even of having just fallen out because they weren't within that top conversation coming out of Margaret River, that they now have an opportunity to then battle against surfers that they should be that step ahead because they have qualified for the CT. So they're going to be surfing against the best in the world in the Challenger Series, but they should have that extra edge to then, like, kind of roll through straight into Snapper and Manly after that with some kind of momentum.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, though, jumping to the narrative around the Challenger Series, they will have that edge as maybe their surfing has matured a bit sooner than their competitors. But we're going to be seeing all these fresh faces on the Challenger Series from people who have just qualified early in the year from, you know, their rankings, their regional rankings on the qualifying series. So we could be seeing some, I just think maybe more new faces onto the Challenger Series and then in turn onto the championship tour, because I just feel like it's all going to look, in my head, it all just looks a little bit more accessible to more people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's definitely a positive thing. And just like the way that the calendar is going to roll out throughout the year is going to make it much easier for those surfers to bounce between the different tours that they need to.
Yeah, another interesting point that again, like, it all looks good in my head. I'm interested to see how it plays out. But in theory, we can actually run the events now in better quality waves, I think, because right now it takes about, including like both the men's and the women's competition time, it takes about 4.5 days to run, or, you know, maybe less if we run less heats, but it's about 4 days in a row. And so sometimes, you know, oftentimes, like the peak of a swell period, we can surf in a swell for those entire 4 days, but the peak of that swell period will be like on one specific day. So, you know, most often we'll see then day one kind of be that day that you just go out in, well, the swell's coming. Let's just get these round one heats because there's non-elimination. Let's just get it out of the way. Where now we'll be able to see, since it's a condensed format, it's less time to take it. We'll be able to see the competition take place and potentially finish when there is just the top of that swell. So if it's 2 days of really good surfing, we can just see the event start and finish all in that really good time of the swell, all in that peak of the swell. Because obviously like wave quality is kind of everything. And that's going to definitely give us a better chance in that.
Yeah, I love that fact, that it could run really quickly and actually just capitalize on getting the surfers in the best possible waves, especially because of the spots that are on tour. Having a think about it though, like, surfing there's so many different types of breaks, so many different types of waves, and each type of wave lends itself to a particular surfer, right? So it's been great to see kind of an even balance of the types of waves represented on the championship tour between point breaks, beach breaks, reef breaks, barrels. There's that variety that's necessary. But having a look at that opening run of the first 5 events, of course, we're looking at Pipeline, which is a predominant left barrel, but it does have that kind of right off of backdoor. So that could kind of go either way. Like predominantly the goofy foots might have the strength unless there's like a strong backhand surfer on the regular foot. But then taking a look at like Sunset, Paniche, Bells, WA, they're all like primarily rights. Different types of waves, each in their own sense of reef breaks, a point break, a beach break. And then just like WA being literally, it could run at Margaret's or it could run at the box. Like you just have no idea. But it kind of like my gut feeling to that is that we're going to see the regular footers have an initial advantage before the mid-season cutoff.
Yeah.
Which will be interesting to see because we have some powerful goofy foots that kind of tend to sit right on that bubble of requalifying, potentially needing their QS results to requalify. And so is that going to put them at a disadvantage? Possibly in those first 5 events when there's so much pressure on already.
One most notably that kind of stands out to me, and that is Bronte Macaulay. I feel like she might kind of sit on that bubble there. And fortunately, WA being her home, maybe that's going to be a good location right before that mid-season cutoff. But yeah, she's someone who comes to mind as a strong goofy footer that maybe might just sit on that cusp.
Yeah, I mean, having a think about Bronte Macaulay, like it would be such a shame to not see her stay in the top 10, especially having a look at the events that are coming after that mid-season cutoff, right? Like she would go so well at G-Land, which is that left reef barrel. You got Trestles on offer, which is like left and right peaks, kind of anyone's game really could come out in success at a wave like Trestles. But then at both like Saquarema in Brazil, it's a predominant left-hand break. We've got Chopu in the mix, that left barrel. So I feel like a surfer like Bronte Macaulay, she could really dominate at both Pipe and Sunset at the start of the season in Hawaii, just because she's so good in heavy waves.
Coming from WA, that's no surprise, right?
Totally. And obviously WA is on the list as well. So I feel like it could go either way for Bronte for sure. But it would just be such a shame to see her lose out after maybe surf spots that don't favor her so much in that first half of the tour, when there's like waves like J-Bay. I mean, one of her best career results came from J-Bay. Like she's so good when it's just a proper perfect point break to unleash that backhand attack. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how some of those surfers that have really struggled to stay requalifying, how many of them are able to actually get to surfing the best waves in that second half of the season.
And I think that's one of the main things that we are seeing, not just about the mid-season cup, but the WSL final narrative as well, is that surfing is based in so many different types of waves. And that's like an important foundation of surfing. And that the fact that you have to be, in order to be world champion, you have to be the best in all types of waves. I think that's been one of like also the negatives towards that narrative around the WSL finals is how can they then use that to determine a world champion on one day at one event, as there might be favoritism towards certain surfers because of that. I mean, this year we'll see it at Trestles, which I think is a pretty easy wave for anybody to surf. I don't know if it will necessarily favor any one particular person on tour, because yes, you do have your locals that have spent a lot of time there, but pretty much everyone on tour now has, I think, spent their fair share of time at lower Trestles.
Exactly.
And it is such an easy wave. It's just notably known as like a little skate park wave that is just easy to attack. But then, to kind of go off of what I just said in the fact of, well, how can you determine a champion on one day? I don't know. My argument to that is the fact that first, so many other sports do it. It's not like it's this new concept. You see it like with the Super Bowl over here in Australia. You see it with the AFL Grand Final. Like so many sports have that narrative of, well, you have to make it to the finals. And then there is that you have to be at the best. Like you have to be good enough all year to get to that point of qualifying. And then you have, your finals or playoffs. And in the NBA, we do see it as like a playoffs. It is best out of 7. And I kind of think what some people don't know is that the WSL finals will actually be the best out of 3 on that day. It's not just like a normal event as we see. It's 5th place on the rankings goes against 4th. Winner of that goes against 3rd. Winner of that goes against 2nd. And winner of that goes against 1st. So there are those advantages to being on different places in the rankings.
And then it's also like the best of 3 heats in that final heat against the world's best, right?
Yes, exactly. So they're going to like go at it again and again. So it isn't just that the format that we see now, oh, whoever wins that contest, becomes a champion. At least there is some consistent required on the day as well. But, I'm all for having to rise to the occasion. Like, I think it's, again, like just a format that, what do we have to lose from it? Right now, I do think professional surfing, it just is a bit stale. It's been the same for so long. And I don't know if other sports and sports fans are like this. And I'm actually probably sure that they are, but people just don't love change, especially in the surfing world, and don't want to try these new things of, yes, we did see the midseason cut and all those changes happen back in 2010, 2011. But one of the positives is that we did see the tour on the men's side go from 45 to 32. Like 45 people on a championship tour is a lot of people.
That is a lot of surfing to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And like that's one change that has remained into the like current present time. And I feel like people forget that those changes once were a change. Like, what does surfing have to lose from trying this for 1 year?
I agree. I think it's a good shift. And if it fails, they can always just go back to the way that things have been running, or they can reassess it again. It's obviously not, it doesn't have to be permanent. But I think it's a good right. change in the right direction, especially in comparison to other sports. I love that you pulled in that about like the Super Bowl or an NBA or the AFL finals, that in so many other sports, they've already found ways to make sure that it's the very best that are getting to those playoff opportunities. Yeah. But then at the playoffs, they also have to have the grit, the determination to actually be able to come out on top after a long season and to really show that they're putting everything in behind them as like a full rounded competitor, not just from the physical aspect of how well they can perform on those days, but it comes into that mental aspect of being a competitor as well. Like their overall strength
That's exactly
as a person gets put to the test. And so I think it's a good thing. I'm like, overall, I'm definitely in favor of this change, just because it's made for other sports to be really enjoyable and for us to really be able to see the world's best athletes put to the test. And I think surfing is now due for that sort of change as well.
This might be harsh, but I feel like the surfers that will be complaining about the midseason cut are the people who will be affected by it. Like Carissa Moore, she posted that being like, hey, I'm excited for this tour next year. She's clearly not worried about that midseason cut. And she's not worried about making the cut for the WSL finals either. She's like, yep, bring it on. Like, I'm going to be world champion either way, is kind of what that spoke to me. And I think it'll be exciting to see the change. Like, let's give it a go. We've seen changes in the past, just kind of, there was hate against them at that moment too. And, some of them have been reversed and then some have stayed in place. And I just don't think surfing really has much to lose by trying the change. But I actually do think it has a lot to lose if we don't find change soon. So it's going to happen whether we like it or not. It's just about what that change is. And I think the way this is set up with the midseason cut straight to the Challenger Series, just the all around tour as a whole is looking a lot more polished, a lot more complete, and just a lot more like a world tour. With that, though, the positives and negatives on the actual format, who do we actually think could benefit or it might be hindered to the surfers on tour?
Well, my initial thought is Caroline Marks. This is going to work in her favor. She's super consistent. She's still so fresh and young to the championship tour, but all around, I think she's one of the most well-rounded surfers. She's had time to surf at so many of those different spots. And so I think that we could really see her sort of rise to the occasion of, I mean, even if she can get into that top 5 conversation coming into, between Mexico and Chopu, where she's got experience surfing at Chopu as well. Like we could see her rise to the top even for this year for a world title conversation if she makes it into the top 5.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And I just feel like for a surfer like her, who's young, who's still got, 10 to 20 years of a career ahead of her, that these kind of changes are going to work in her favor.
Yeah, I also think that it could be a benefit to Isabella Nichols. Next year, she's no longer going to be a rookie. She already got second at the Rip Curl Newcastle Cup earlier this year, which was just her second event on the championship tour. So she really came out with a bang and something to prove. And she's, still kind of in that top 5 conversation a little bit for this year. But yeah, I think we could see her next year really come more into her own. Her surfing's even matured this year, but I actually strongly believe that within the next 5 years, we will see Isabella Nichols as a world champion, as a crowned world champion. So
I like that call.
Yeah, I'm definitely calling it. I love her style. She has an air of Steph Gilmore to me in her surfing.
Yeah, she sort of has that it factor that we haven't. I mean, as incredibly talented as the rest of the women are in the field, she has that bit of flair and the it factor that we haven't seen come through on the women's side, maybe since Steph.
Yeah, totally. Like, she has the power, but just like most notably for me, it's her style and the way she approaches her maneuvers throughout her wave, the way she reads a wave. So I think this could be a really good advantage for her in the fact of maybe someone who hasn't had as much experience on tour as some of the others, just needs to get into that final 5 conversation, which she's already doing as a rookie. And with that maturing over the next year or two, we could really see her then continue to come into her own, line herself up into a good position with her rankings and attack it on the day of.
Tatiana Weston Webb is another one that I feel like she just continues to get stronger. And looking at the waves that are now going to be on the tour for the women's side, that like scares me to think of these other girls having to go up against Tati when it comes to like really big, heavy waves. Yeah. She's just, she's, currently already in that top 5 conversation. She's been really consistent and she just continues to get stronger. So I'm really excited to see what we could see coming out of Tati in the next couple of years as well. Maybe getting herself a world title.
Yeah, she's kind of been that dark horse for me too, like someone who I haven't really had my eye on. And, when I have conversations with my brother and dad, they always bring her into the conversation and are always complimentary of her surfing. And she's kind of been someone that has been off my radar for that, but has definitely, I've been keeping my eye on her this year. And like with a strong finish in Maui, a win at Margaret River, a second place at Narrabeen. She's just had a phenomenal year so far. And not that she has to prove herself to me, but she's definitely on my radar now. So I definitely back you in that. Like, it just seems like she's only getting stronger and that this could just like the rise could continue to grow into that world title.
Especially for a surfer like her who's kind of gritty and really hungry every time she gets into the water.
Yes, exactly. That's a good way of describing it.
I'm really curious to see how Steph handles all these changes, right? Like she is like the greatest of all time, 7 world titles, the most graceful, the most stylish surfer that's ever come through in the women's field, maybe men's as well. Like she's just the absolute queen, right? But she's kind of hot and cold when it comes to competing. And often what we notice
at the moment she is,
totally. Like she waits for the waves to come to her. And when you get her on the right wave, it's like the most incredible thing to watch. Like by far my favorite surfer to just actually watch surf. But when it comes down to those moments in heats when maybe the waves aren't producing exactly what you need, like Steph's a surfer that can really just knock out in those moments and doesn't have that kind of grit and determination that we might see from a Caroline, a Tatiana, a fresh Isabella Nichols as a rookie, still so hungry. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like where we could maybe see Steph go in the next, this top 5 conversation and into the coming seasons?
That's such a good question. I feel like we could see her go into retirement, just kind of like we talked about how there are kind of more guys on the men's side of the tour already announcing their retirement. They've, Jeremy Flores in the past few days he's been on tour for so long.
Yeah, it's got to be like 15 years or something.
Yeah, totally. Like I guess in their kind of perspective, it's been like they've already gone through so many changes or just experiences on the tour. And to start fresh with a new format, it's going to be a new way of thinking, a new way of competing. And it's like, you know what? I've kind of done that. I'm not looking to reset everything. And this could be something for Steph too. She's not looking to reset all the groundwork that she's done to what the current format has been in the past. So we could see that come from her in the next few years, and whether she is still hungry to win that 8th world title and set that record above Lane Beachley. But
just thinking about that with the 8th world title, like on question, I think she's super hungry for it. And I could see that being like the one thing that brings her back over and over again, kind of like the Kelly Slater, right? Just wanting to get to the Olympics or just wanting to maybe get a 12th world title. Like the numbers that they already have being really significant to them and meaning a lot, but not being enough. And I think that's the one draw card for a Steph, where I genuinely believe that she wants to get that edge over Lane Beachley with an 8th world title. That could see her kind of put some kind of shift into her approach and to recognize what she needs to do to actually come out on top.
And that's true. Like, even as we just said, it's not like she's been having her best surfing on tour this year, but she's still currently in that top 5 conversation. So that really speaks to who she is as a competitor, who she is as a surfer, that she's not delivering her best, but she's still in that, WSL finals conversation. So it could actually be just what she needs, as she's like, it's just looking like she's starting to lose that consistency for a year-round thing. But we are definitely still seeing moments of her come forward. And the WSL finals, might actually be that moment for her.
Well, I feel like Carissa is the one surfer that's going to maybe keep Steph Gilmore at bay from getting that 8th world title. She's just so consistent. Like, no matter what the challenge is, she continues to prove herself heat in and heat out. Doesn't matter what the venue is. Like, she's clearly just sitting on top at the moment. And I think she's just kind of entered a new space within her own surfing, especially after winning an Olympic gold medal, but winning an Olympic gold medal while sitting in that number 1 seeding coming into things and while dominating the championship tour this year so far.
Yeah. Joe Chappelle just did a interview on the lineup with Dave Prodin, and a quote that pulled out from that is that, he described it as, it's like Carissa just realized that she's the best surfer in the world. And
I love that.
I really resonate with that. It really feels like that to me as well. And I went into a conversation with my dad recently on her going into retirement or not. And he was like, I'd just love to see her go into retirement now, like finishing off so on top, because we've seen her actually air words of retirement in the past, when she had a break in between. I think it was more of her, maybe it was between her 3rd and 4th world title or her 2nd and 3rd. But either way, she was just kind of saying, I'm getting a bit tired. We then did see her announce that she was going to take a break after her 4th world title. And, whether that was just for a break or for her to focus on preparing for the Olympics, it didn't really matter anyways. And everyone ended up having a break. But I just feel like she's come back so hot. And I disagreed in that conversation with my dad of going, it's not like she's Kelly Slater right now that pushed on, finally got that one more world title, or even Steph Gilmore finally got that one more and now they can relax. She's just so dominant right now. I actually think she can't, because there will be too much question of how much more could I have done. And yeah, I think with how she's surfing right now, she could go on to be the person with 8 world titles. I'm not even kidding. Like, that's another 4 in her, but gosh, how she's surfing right now, it really could happen in the next 4 years. Just bang, bang, bang.
Yeah, I could see it as well. I think she's absolutely in form. It's like she's peaking right now at the most important time within her career.
Exactly. That's what it feels like.
Which is really exciting, because she's been on tour for so long now that for her to now be hitting, it's almost like she's peaked multiple times, but she's like getting better and better and smarter and more engaged. And I think even, you bringing in kind of her statement about the changes to the WSL tour coming in 2022, that she's excited for it. I think that's her just taking it straight on, like excited to get into something different. It's going to give her that taste of something that's a little bit more fun. Like, it's going to keep that fun element in it, which I think is really important to Carissa within surfing. And it's going to keep her hungry to want to come back for more of that change and that variety. Like, she needs a bit of variety thrown into things. And I think that could actually help her over the next 4 years, maybe walk away with, those multiple more world titles.
Yeah. And, I guess the people that we've seen this year really keep her at bay is the person I'd say is Joanne Defay. She's currently sitting 2nd on the tour right now, knocked her out in the semifinals at Rottnest, knocked her out in the finals at Surf Ranch. So she's definitely been that thorn in Carissa's side this year. And we could finally see Joanne get her first world title through this as well. Like, that's what I love about this conversation, is that there is so much already this late in the tour. We still don't know who will be world champion. And we don't know that until the very end, where, like I said earlier in this episode, normally by this stage of the tour, we kind of have an idea that, oh, it could be 1, 2, or 3 people, you know? So I just love how many people we have thrown in this conversation of saying it could be them this year. Like this year could be their year. Gosh, even Sally, like, I mean, it would be rude not to mention her right now. She's been that person gunning for that world title. And, you know, it just keeps not being her year, unfortunately, year after year, with such an incredible run on the tour for so long. But this could really lend to her.
She's like sitting almost equal with points to Joanne at the moment. So that 3rd and 4th place position is divided by like less than 400 points between the two of them.
That's such a good point.
So it's like basically a heat, you know, as far as who's kind of has the upper hand on the other one. So I think Sally's definitely going to be like somebody really interesting to watch in the next couple of events. And then Tyler Wright is back, which is so exciting. So she's, you know, she could still make it into that top 5 conversation. She's sitting at number 7 on the rankings right now. But for Tyler to be back in competition mode after being out, you know, with illness for so long, I think she's going to be an interesting one to see if she continues to make those full recoveries and she can kind of keep her energy in check and all of that. Like, her surfing is so dynamic that she could really like just push the other women to have
world
to
champion, right?
Totally. Like, it speaks
She's
for itself.
herself.
But like, Tyler Wright is back, which is really exciting to see. I think, I don't know. The women at the top of the game right now, they're just, it's really great. I'm so stoked for each of them, and being able, even thinking of those changes to the tour, to the changes coming up in 2022. To know that we could see some of those matchups of those huge names matching up early on, it's going to add that much more excitement, and it's going to continue to make them push each other in every heat to surf better and better before we even get to the finals.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's something that I've been trying to keep myself in check with, I guess, even throughout this podcast and throughout just my thoughts on women's surfing, is that I'm easily so excitable by it that I have been really trying to challenge myself of saying, well, what do I actually think about this? Like, not to always just be like, it's women's surfing. Like, it's great, you know?
You're much better at that than I am.
We definitely have a tendency to do that. But, you know, I have definitely caught myself this many times throughout this conversation saying, wow, well, this new format could lend to this person or could lend to this person. And I don't think that's coming from much of that point of, oh, I just am excited about women's surfing. It's actually coming from a realization to me that we really could see, will Carissa continue to dominate, or we could see some brand new world champions with this new format and really lend to people who haven't even been in that top 3 conversation in the past couple of years. So I am continuing to look forward to see how this year goes, see how next year goes. And, you know, if the WSL finals is a successful thing, if the midseason cutoff is successful. And like I've said that many times throughout this, I'm just excited to see that change, because it just, to me, it just has been a bit stale as a surfing fan.
Well, this was a really fun conversation. I think it's going to be cool to see it kind of unfold. And getting into what we'll be able to talk about in our next episode, Rachel, of course, Mexico's starting up this week. There's some great waves at a right-hand point, which is always my favorite to surf and maybe my favorite to watch. So yeah, we'll be able to tap into possibly just an update, maybe an actual debrief if the entire event runs.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see how it goes. With it being early morning in Australia for me now, I know, like, as I was falling asleep last night, they had just called the event on. So I know a day of competition has gone by, or at least some heat surfing. So yeah, excited to see how that continues to play out for the rest of this week.
Well, thanks so much for that, Rach. So fun to talk about these things. And yeah, I'm excited to see what we can get into next week.
I can't wait. Until next week, thanks everybody for listening.
Bye.
I just responded and then was like, oh, my throat's blocked.
I was like,
right into the
I
microphone.
think she wants to contribute here because your response sounded contributing. But
Right into the microphone. I just said, I can't even do it.